I knew my marriage was over before the train crossed the river, before my coffee cooled in my hand, before Mason even realized I had his phone. I was wedged between a man in a rain jacket and a woman balancing a paper bag of pastries, trying not to think about the claims review waiting on my desk, when his screen lit up with Maren Delaney's name. Mason and I had the same black phone, same clear case, same stupid cracked corner near the charger. And in my rush out of our Portland apartment, I had grabbed the wrong one. I answered because family calls that early usually mean something broke, but the first thing his sister breathed into my ear was, "Did you get Brielle to sign the brand release yet? Or is Mom going to have to push this herself?" For a second, the train noise fell behind my own pulse. Maren kept talking like she was reading from a plan they had practiced, telling Mason that Kelsey had a restaurant contact ready, that Gail wanted the paperwork clean, and that nobody serious would touch the product unless Brielle stopped acting like the name belonged only to her. The name did belong to me. Stanton Pantry was mine before the wedding, before Mason started calling my late nights cute, before he ever touched a shipping label or carried one box of jars into a farmer's market booth. I stared at his lock screen while Maren laughed and said, "She has no parents close enough to check anything. Mason, just tell her it's for the marriage, and she'll feel guilty saying no." My fingers went cold around the phone. I had heard ugly things in my job. People inventing stories over dented bumpers and staged accidents. But there was something different about hearing your own life discussed like an unlocked drawer. Maren added that Gail thought I was too sentimental about a small food label that could finally do something useful for the Delaney family, and that Kelsey was getting impatient because she had already promised Mason a path into the vendor circuit. I swallowed once, tasted coffee and panic, then said her name in a voice so flat it barely sounded like mine. Maren went silent, and in that silence, I understood they were not afraid of hurting me, only of being heard. By the time I reached the claims office, every small thing Mason had said began changing shape in my head. 6 months earlier, he had asked for the vendor email password because he could answer customer questions after late shifts, and I felt guilty for hesitating. Gail had once turned one of my jars in her hand and murmured that a wife who keeps everything separate teaches her husband to feel like a guest. Maren had laughed at my market table and said Stanton Pantry sounded fine, but Delaney Pantry would look warmer on shelves. None of it felt careless now. The password request. Gail's hand around my jar. Maren testing my married name against the label. Each memory had a receipt attached. I sat at my desk, with Mason's phone buried in my coat pocket, and opened the claim folder. But the bumper photos blurred into permit renewals, shipping labels, and the trademark receipt paid before I became Brielle Delaney. My supervisor stopped near my cubicle and asked if I was all right, and I gave the only answer that would not invite questions. Just a rough commute. I'm good. Mason's first text came before lunch, and the words were careful enough to make my stomach turn. "Brielle, don't let Maren make this sound worse than it is. We were going to talk when the timing was better." I read it twice because he did not write. "I never planned this." Or, "Kelsey has nothing to do with your business." Or, "My family crossed a line." He only objected to the way I found out, and that gap told me more than any confession would have. I finished my reviews because damaged trucks still needed decisions, and people expected answers by day's end. Every note was clean. Every email sounded steady. And no one walking past my desk knew my marriage had cracked open between 2 train stops. But I knew. Mason had not been standing beside what I built. He had been measuring where to place his name. Hannah called just as I was leaving the claims office, and the tightness in her voice made me stop before I reached the parking garage. She was at a coffee shop near Burnside, close enough to my route home that I knew the place by its burnt espresso smell and crowded 2 top tables. "Brielle, listen to me, and do not go home blind," she breathed, and I heard cups clinking behind her like life had the nerve to keep moving. "Mason is here with Gail. Maren." And a woman I'm pretty sure is Kelsey Monroe. And they are not talking like this is a misunderstanding. I stood beside the elevator bank with my bag cutting into my shoulder while Hannah lowered her voice. Kelsey was not laughing or playing some cheap little part. And somehow that made it worse. She sounded calm, almost professional, saying the restaurant contact would not introduce Mason to any vendor unless the paperwork clearly showed he had permission to use Stanton Pantry's name, packaging, and customer list. Then Gail leaned in and said Mason needed to stop asking and start making me understand that a wife does not keep a door closed on her husband's future. My stomach turned, not because Kelsey existed, but because she was speaking from a version of my life Mason had sold her. Hannah kept going, each sentence landing cleaner than the last, and told me Kelsey said Brielle seems attached to the brand. But if she signs, this could be good for everyone. Gail answered that attachment was exactly why Mason had to use the marriage angle before I got defensive. Mason did not correct them, did not say my name like it belonged to a person, only asked whether the release needed to be notarized before a vendor meeting would count. I thanked Hannah and ended the call with my thumb hovering over Mason's last text. For almost a minute, I stood there with the office lights buzzing above me, feeling the shape of the day settle into evidence. Marin had exposed the plan. Mason had confirmed he knew. Gail had supplied the pressure. And Kelsey had proved the outside door was already being prepared. I opened my own phone, changed the vendor email password, turned on two-factor authentication, saved Mason's messages, and sent myself a clean timeline before I trusted my heart to remember anything. When I opened the apartment door, Mason was not alone. Gail sat on the couch with her purse still on her lap. Marin leaned against the kitchen counter, and a flat folder rested upside down on the coffee table beside a cold pizza box and 3 sweating glasses of water. The room looked less like a home than a place where people had rehearsed what to say before I arrived. Mason stood first, soft voice ready. Brielle, we need to clear this up like adults. And I kept my coat on because nothing in that room felt safe enough to stay for. I did not ask whether he loved me. I did not ask why Kelsey knew more about my business than I knew about my own marriage. I pointed at the folder and asked if those were the papers he wanted me to sign. Mason's face changed before his mouth did, and that 1 second answered me before he managed. It's just a release, so I can help move Stanton Pantry forward. I picked up the folder and turned the first page. The language was dry and neat. The kind of language meant to make theft sound like teamwork, granting Mason permission to use the brand name, packaging design, recipes, customer list, and vendor contacts for business development. My thumb stopped on the words third-party collaboration, and Kelsey's name from Hannah's call landed right beside them in my head. Gail shifted forward, voice tight, saying marriage cannot work when a wife keeps every door locked against her husband. Marin added that I was letting a good product sit small because I liked being the only name on it. I took a photo of the page before anyone could reach for it. Mason stepped closer and lowered his voice, asking if I was really going to tear apart our home over a label. I looked at the folder, then at him, and answered that he had just called 6 years of my labor a label because he had already decided it was easier to rename my work than build his own. The room went still. I slid the papers into my bag, told them every word after tonight could go through my lawyer, and walked out before their family version of love could ask for one more signature. I slept at Hannah's place with my coat folded under my head because a real bed felt too close to pretending the night had not happened. In the morning, she drove me to a small office off Southeast Division, where Priya Caldwell worked between a tax preparer and a dentist. Priya did not gasp when I told her about Marin's call, Hannah's warning, the folder, or Mason asking whether I would ruin our home over a label. She pulled a legal pad closer and asked, "Who filed the trademark? Who paid the fees? And whose name is on the permits?" I opened my tote and laid out the paper trail. The trademark receipt had my name. The market license had my name. The vendor email was tied to my recovery account. And the first packaging invoice still carried Stanton because I bought it before I married Mason. Priya studied the photo of the release form, then stopped on customer list and third-party collaboration. Her face did not change, but her pen underlined both phrases before she said, "Do not sign anything. Do not explain by text. And do not let him near another password." Her questions were plain enough to keep me from floating apart. Did Mason ever sign a supplier agreement? Did his paycheck ever cover registration fees? Did I ever authorize Kelsey Monroe to speak for the brand? Did Gail or Marin have access to customer records? Each no gave the room a harder floor under my feet. Priya saved Mason's texts, Hannah's account, the folder photos, and the timeline email I had sent myself, and then said Oregon judges cared less about family language than clean records. And my records showed Stanton Pantry existed before Mason tried to step into it. By the time we left, Priya had drafted a notice warning Mason not to call himself owner, partner, or authorized contact. A second letter would go to Kelsey if she used my name. Recipes, packaging, or customer list without written consent. From Hannah's kitchen table, I changed every vendor password, removed Mason from recovery access, and sent suppliers one calm update that business communication had to come directly from me. I was not asking why they had done it anymore. I was making sure they could not do it again. Marin posted first, because of course she did. By morning, her Facebook page carried one of those careful speeches people write when they want sympathy without admitting what they did, saying, "Some women marry into a family and still keep every door locked when others build something honest." Gail commented with a broken heart and a line about mothers watching sons be punished. Mason did not write a word, but he left both posts up, and that silence matched what Hannah had heard. I sent screenshots to Priya and Hannah before my hands could do anything emotional. Priya answered within minutes. "Do not respond online. Save the post. Save the comments. And let me handle contact." By noon, her letter told Marin and Gail to remove statements that interfered with my customer relationships and misrepresented ownership of Stanton Pantry. The proof was not hidden in a dramatic reveal. It was in their own public words. Pretending a brand in my legal name was a family opportunity I had stolen. The first door to close was Kelsey's. A vendor she knew from the Pearl District restaurant messaged her asking why she was introducing Mason around a product with ownership trouble attached. Then her manager asked why restaurant email had been used for private business. And suddenly the path Mason promised her did not look clean anymore. Kelsey called me from a number I did not know, voice tight, and asked, "Brielle, did you ever agree to let Mason use Stanton Pantry?" If I had agreed, I told her, he would not have needed his mother and sister to teach him how to corner me. The line went quiet long enough for that to land. Kelsey admitted Mason had told her I was emotional about change but basically on board. And I felt no satisfaction hearing it. Only the confirmation of another lie with my name inside it. I ended the call and forwarded the number to Priya. By evening, Marin's post was gone. Gail's comment disappeared with it. And Hannah texted that Marin's salon owner had warned her not to drag customers into family drama again. Nobody had shouted my truth for me. Their paper trail had started charging them interest. The settlement conference was held in a plain room that smelled like paper, coffee, and people trying not to say what they really wanted. Mason sat across from me with his lawyer beside him, wearing the same careful face he used when customers complained at the store and he needed to sound reasonable. Priya placed my folder in front of her and kept one hand on it. Not dramatic, just steady. Mason's lawyer began by saying Mason had supported my small business during the marriage and only wanted recognition for the value he helped create. I watched Mason nod, like the sentence had not been built on air. He had never signed a supplier agreement, never paid a registration fee, never stood in the rain at a market table before sunrise unless customers were already taking pictures. When the lawyer called Stanton Pantry a shared marital effort, Priya opened the folder and slid the first stack forward. Trademark filed before marriage. Market permits in Brielle Stanton's name. Packaging invoices paid from her account. Vendor email registered to her recovery number. The room got quieter with every page. Then Priya placed Mason's release form on top. The same one he had left on our coffee table, like I was supposed to sign away my own work between a cold pizza box and 3 glasses of water. The mediator read the section naming brand use, recipes, packaging, customer list, and third-party collaboration, then looked at Mason's side without saying much. Mason shifted in his chair and finally muttered, "I was trying to help her grow it. That's all." Priya did not raise her voice. She played Mason's voicemail from the night after I left. His voice thin and angry through the speaker, saying if I refused to sign, vendors should know I was unstable and difficult to work with. That sentence did more damage than anything I could have said. He had walked in claiming support, and his own voice explained the pressure. Then came Kelsey's email. She wrote that Mason had told her I was basically on board with transferring use rights, and that the release was only a formality before vendor introductions. I did not hate her in that moment. I only understood how many versions of me Mason had invented to make his plan sound clean. By the end, Mason withdrew every claim tied to Stanton Pantry. He agreed not to use the name, recipes, packaging, customer list, or vendor contacts, and not to represent himself as owner, partner, or authorized contact. Gail received a no-contact warning through counsel. Marin's posts stayed deleted, and Kelsey's restaurant removed her from vendor outreach. The papers they wanted me to sign became the papers that locked them out. The divorce closed quietly, which felt right because the loudest part had already happened in paper. Stanton Pantry stayed mine. Every vendor stayed on my side because the records were clean. And a small Portland grocer agreed to carry my jars after I walked in with my permits, labels, and supplier emails in order. Mason sent one message through Priya saying he was sorry and that his family had pushed too hard, but the apology arrived after he lost access. So I let Priya answer for me. Kelsey sent a separate note saying, "I deserved the truth earlier." Marin stopped posting. Gail stopped calling. And their version of family finally had nothing left to bill me for. Months later, I was sealing boxes in my own kitchen when someone I had met through a vendor asked me to coffee. And I said yes because peace no longer felt like a warning sign. I did not need him to rescue me, choose me loudly, or make my name look safer beside his. I had my work, my home, my records, and a life nobody could rename. If this story reminded you of a time someone called your boundaries selfish, leave a comment, because someone listening tonight may need proof that peace can begin the moment you stop signing yourself away.